Welcome back, you beautiful catastrophe. Yes, you. The one they've been whispering about in hushed tones. The one whose name pops up in conversations that suddenly go quiet when you enter the room. They finally figured it out, didn't they? They finally pieced together what happened to you during those months, those years, that dark period when you vanished from their radar, stopped posting, stopped existing in the way they needed you to exist. And now they're terrified. Not because of what broke you, but because of what you became when no one was watching. Let me tell you what really happened while you were gone. They thought you were falling apart, crumbling, disintegrating into nothing. They imagined you crying every night, spiraling, losing your mind, becoming exactly the kind of broken they predicted. They checked your social media, hoping to find evidence of your collapse, screenshots they could share, proof that you were finally paying the price for being too much or too intense, or whatever lie they told themselves to sleep at night. But you weren't posting, were you? You weren't performing your pain for an audience. You were doing something far more dangerous. You were rebuilding yourself in complete silence. No therapist, no support group, no validation posts, no crying videos with soft lighting and aesthetic sadness. You went into the void, into that pitch black space where most people lose themselves forever. And you didn't just survive it, you studied it. You mapped every corner of your own darkness, like a cartographer of hell. You learned the language of your demons, and then you made them speak your name with respect. They wanted you to come back weaker, more manageable, finally tamed by trauma. Instead, you came back as something they have no framework to understand anymore. You didn't heal the way therapy promised you would, with forgiveness and closure and healthy boundaries. You healed the way a broken bone heals, stronger at the fracture point, harder where it hurt the most. You didn't learn to let go of your pain, you learned to weaponize it. You didn't process your trauma, you processed yourself through the trauma, until what emerged on the other side wasn't the same person who went in. And that is what they figured out. That is what keeps them up at night now. They realize you didn't just survive your dark period, you evolved in it. You didn't come back looking for their approval, their understanding, their pity, or their applause. You came back looking like someone who doesn't need anything from anyone ever again. And people who don't need anything, those are the only people who truly have power. Let me tell you what power really looks like. They sent people to check on you during that time, didn't they? Oh, they did. Maybe they didn't tell you directly, but you felt it. The casual messages from people who never cared before, the just thinking about you texts from faces you hadn't seen in years. They were reconnaissance missions disguised as concern. They wanted intel, they wanted updates, they wanted to know if you were as destroyed as they hoped you'd be. Because your destruction would validate their choices, their betrayals, their decision to abandon you when things got hard. But every single person they sent came back with the same confused report. Something like, I don't know, they seem fine, like weirdly fine. They're not talking about it, they're not posting about it, they're just different, quieter, colder. I can't explain it. And that's when the fear started creeping in. That slow realization that you weren't broken in the way broken people are supposed to look. You weren't begging for help. You weren't drowning in self-pity. You weren't performing recovery for social media validation. You were doing something far more unsettling. You were becoming unreadable, untraceable, unpredictable. You stopped explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand anyway. You stopped defending your choices to people who already made up their minds about you. You stopped showing up to arguments that were designed to drain you. Stop responding to provocations that were meant to trigger you. And the silence, oh, the silence drove them absolutely insane. Because silence from someone who used to care so deeply, that's not peace. That's power consolidating. Let me tell you what happened in that dark period that they'll never understand. You didn't go to therapy and learn to communicate better or set healthy boundaries with people who violated every boundary you ever had. You didn't read self-help books that told you to forgive people who never apologized. You didn't do the pretty, acceptable version of healing that makes everyone around you comfortable. You did the ugly work, the real work, the kind of work that has no Instagram aesthetic and no motivational quote attached to it. You sat with every betrayal until it stopped hurting and started teaching. You replayed every moment of manipulation until you could see the patterns, the tactics, the psychological warfare they ran on you while smiling to your face. You examined every relationship that drained you until you understood exactly how you were being used. You didn't forgive these people. You studied them like case files. You didn't let go of the pain. You let it burn through you until it purified into something else entirely. Rage became clarity. Hurt became strategy. Confusion became precision. And here's what they can't handle. You didn't need their closure, their apology, their acknowledgement of what they did. You gave yourself something far more powerful than closure. The closure you gave yourself immunity. Immunity to their manipulation tactics. Immunity to their guilt trips. Immunity to their fake concern and performative care. You became someone who cannot be played anymore because you've seen every card in the deck. You can't gaslight someone who's memorized all the lies. You can't manipulate someone who studied the manual. They figured out that you fixed yourself by breaking every rule of acceptable healing. You didn't become softer, you became sharper. You didn't become more trusting, you became more discerning. You didn't open your heart wider, you built better gates. And the people who expected you to come back begging for their presence in your life, they're the ones begging now, not out loud, never out loud, but in the way they watch you, in the way they bring up your name, in the way they can't move on. You want to know the real difference between therapy, healing, and what you did? Therapy would have taught you to understand why they hurt you, to have compassion for their brokenness, to accept that hurt people hurt people. But you learned something therapy doesn't teach. You learned that some people hurt others because they enjoy it, because it makes them feel powerful, because your pain was entertainment to them. And once you understood that, once you really understood that, forgiveness became irrelevant. Let's talk about what really happened when you stopped trying to fix things their way and started doing it your way. They wanted you to go to therapy, right? They suggested it with that concerned look, that tone that says, you really need help. And maybe you did go. Maybe you sat in that office and tried to explain the depth of what you felt. But something happened in those sessions, something they didn't expect and your therapist couldn't quite name. You started asking the wrong questions. Or maybe they were the right questions, just too dangerous for comfortable healing. You didn't ask, how do I forgive them? You asked, why should I? You didn't ask, how do I move on? You asked, why would I forget the lessons their betrayal taught me? You didn't ask, how do I open up again? You asked, why would I make myself vulnerable to people who proved they can't be trusted? And slowly, session by session, you realized something absolutely critical. The healing model they were selling you was designed to make you compatible with the same world that broke you. They wanted to sand down your edges, soften your anger, make you pliable again so you could slot back into their version of normal. But you didn't want normal. Normal is what destroyed you. Normal is what allowed people to use you and call it love. You wanted to leave at first. You wanted to leave. Normal is what made you accept crumbs and call it a feast. You didn't want to heal back into the person who could be hurt that way. You wanted to become someone who couldn't be touched. So you stopped going to therapy the traditional way and started building your own recovery program. And it looked nothing like what they told you healing should look like. You didn't journal about gratitude, you journaled about patterns, about red flags you missed, about tactics people used on you. You didn't meditate on forgiveness, you meditated on clarity, on truth, on the cold hard facts of who people really were when the masks came off. You didn't practice positive affirmations, you practiced reality affirmations. You looked in the mirror and instead of saying, "I am worthy of love," you said, "I am done accepting garbage disguised as affection." Instead of, "I forgive those who hurt me," you said, "I remember every lesson they taught me, and I will never be that naive again." Instead of, "I am healing," you said, "I am becoming untouchable." And that shift in language, in focus, in intention, that's what they can't fix because there's nothing broken about it. You're not broken, you're recalibrated. You're not damaged, you're upgraded. They figured out that your dark period wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. You broke through the illusion of what healing is supposed to look like. You broke through the fantasy that forgiveness is always the answer. You broke through the lie that letting go means pretending it didn't happen. You held on to every piece of truth you learned in that darkness, and you built a fortress out of it. Not a prison, a fortress. You're not trapped in your past. You're protected by the wisdom it gave you. And now when they look at you, they see someone who is fundamentally different from who you were before. You don't smile the same way. You don't trust the same way. You don't love the same way. You don't exist in the world the same way. There's a weight to your presence now, a gravity that wasn't there before. People feel it when you walk into a room. The air gets thicker, conversations get more honest or more nervous, but never the same. You affect the temperature now. They wanted you to heal, so you'd be easy again, manageable, predictable, safe. Someone they could feel comfortable around, someone who wouldn't remind them of their own capacity for cruelty. But you healed into someone who makes them deeply uncomfortable, not because you're hostile, but because you're aware. You see through people now in a way that makes them feel transparent, vulnerable, exposed. Your eyes don't search for the good in people anymore, they search for the truth. And truth makes liars very, very nervous. Here's what they'll never tell you about the right way to heal. The right way is the way that makes other people comfortable with having hurt you. It's the way that lets them off the hook, that allows them to say, "See, you're fine now, we're good, right?" without ever having to acknowledge what they did. It's healing that absolves them of guilt without requiring them to change. It's recovery that makes you safe for them to be around again without them having to earn back trust they destroyed. But your way makes them sit with what they did. Your absence makes them think. Your silence makes them wonder. Your indifference makes them question whether they ever mattered to you at all. And that is the most powerful revenge that doesn't look like revenge. You didn't have to plot against them. You didn't have to expose them. You didn't have to destroy them. You just had to become someone who doesn't need them anymore. And for people who fed off your need for them, that's worse than any confrontation could ever be. Now we need to talk about what really terrified them about your so-called healing era. It wasn't that you got better, it's how you got better. See, they could handle you being happy, they could handle you moving on, they could even handle you thriving. What they cannot handle is that you thrived without doing any of the things they told you that you had to do. You didn't forgive them and find peace, you found peace without forgiving them. You didn't need closure from them. You closed the door yourself from the inside. You didn't get over it the way getting over it is supposed to look. You didn't have some breakthrough moment where you suddenly understood their perspective and released all resentment in a wave of enlightened compassion. No, you had a different kind of breakthrough. You realized that understanding why someone hurt you doesn't obligate you to let them back in. You realized that forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone just because time passed. You realize that healing doesn't require you to make peace with your enemies, just with yourself. And that's when you became dangerous to their narrative, because they needed you to eventually come around, to soften, to reach out, to give them another chance, to prove they've changed. They needed your healing to include them somehow, to validate that they weren't really that bad, that it was all just a misunderstanding, that you overreacted back then, but now you're healthy enough to see things clearly. But you did see things clearly. That was the problem. You saw them exactly as they were and decided that clarity meant distance. Let me tell you what your healing era really looked like to them. It looked like death. Not your death, theirs. The death of their access to you, the death of their ability to affect you, the death of their relevance in your story. You stopped being someone they could predict, manipulate, or understand. You stopped fitting into the box they built for you in their minds. You stopped playing the role they assigned you. And when someone refuses to play their part in your story, it's like they stop existing in the way you need them to exist. They become a stranger wearing a familiar face. They watched you go through this transformation and they kept waiting for the moment you'd crack. The moment the mask would slip and they'd see the broken person underneath. But there was no mask. This was just who you became. You're not pretending to be okay. You're not faking being unbothered. You're not performing strength for an audience. You genuinely do not care about them anymore, in any direction. Not love, not hate, not curiosity, not resentment, nothing. And nothing is terrifying because it can't be manipulated. You can work with love, you can work with hate, but you can't work with nothing. Your healing terrified them more than your breakdown, because your breakdown made sense to them. It fit their worldview. It confirmed that actions have consequences, that if you hurt someone enough, they'll fall apart. Your breakdown was predictable, expected, almost satisfying to them in a sick way because it meant they had power over you. But your healing? Your healing didn't make sense. It broke all the rules. You weren't supposed to get better without them. You weren't supposed to become stronger without their validation. You weren't supposed to thrive while cutting them off completely. And here's the part that really messes with them. You didn't just heal from what they did to you. You healed from needing people like them in your life at all. You didn't just recover from the specific betrayal. You immunized yourself against that entire category of person. You pattern recognized your way out of ever being vulnerable to their type again. You learned to spot the red flags they showed you in the beginning that you ignored. You learned to trust your instincts when something feels off instead of giving benefit of the doubt. You learned that sometimes the warning signs are subtle, but they're always there. They can't come back into your life because there's no door anymore. Not a locked door, not a door with conditions, not a door that might open someday if they apologize correctly. There's no door. There's a wall. And on that wall is everything you learned written in permanent ink. Every lie they told, every manipulation tactic they used, every time they made you question your own reality, every moment they took advantage of your kindness, it's all there. And you read it every day to remind yourself why that wall exists. Not out of bitterness, out of wisdom. You know what the most powerful thing you did was? You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped trying to make them understand why you cut them off. You stopped responding to their "can we talk" messages. You stopped caring whether they thought you were being unfair, harsh, unforgiving, cold. You released yourself from the exhausting job of making people who hurt you understand why you won't let them do it again. You just moved on, without their permission, without their understanding, without their closure. And that broke their brain. Because in their mind, they're entitled to closure. They're entitled to an explanation. They're entitled to the chance to defend themselves, to explain their side, to make you see that it wasn't that bad, or that they've changed, or that you're remembering it wrong. But you didn't give them that chance because you realized something crucial. Closure is something you give yourself. It's not a conversation you have with someone who hurt you. It's a decision you make alone, and you decided. They just weren't included in that decision-making process. Let's go deeper into what happened when you stopped healing the way they expected and started building immunity instead. This is where it gets really uncomfortable for them, because immunity means they can't infect you anymore. Not with guilt, not with nostalgia, not with the memory of good times, not with promises of change. You vaccinated yourself against them using the disease they gave you. Every lie became an antibody. Every betrayal became resistance. Every manipulation taught your system to recognize and reject them automatically. You didn't forgive and forget. You remembered and learned. You cataloged every tactic like a field guide to emotional warfare. The love bombing at the beginning, the slow erosion of boundaries, the gaslighting when you questioned inconsistencies, the silent treatment as punishment, the fake apologies that blamed you for their actions, the crocodile tears when you tried to leave. You mapped it all out like a military strategy, because that's what it was. And now you can see those patterns in others before they even fully form. You've become unfoolable. That's what they can't stand about your healing. You didn't just recover, you evolved. You didn't just feel better, you got smarter. You didn't just move on, you moved up to a completely different level of consciousness, where their games don't work anymore. It's like you were playing checkers, and they had you figured out, but then you learned chess. And now they're still trying to use checkers strategies on a chess player. It doesn't work. You're operating from a different rule book now, and they don't even know the game changed.